In this video, we're looking at section P2, and the first thing we're going to look at is the product rule for exponents. The product rule states that when we're multiplying exponential expressions and they have the same base, we can add the exponents. It only works if they have the same base, and then our base does not change. So looking at example 1, it says multiply each expression using the product rule. Our first one is 2 to the second times 2 to the third. So our base doesn't change, that's still 2, and then we add the exponents, which is 2 plus 3. So our answer is 2 to the fifth. Or we can multiply that out, that would be equal to 32. For part B, we have things grouped with parentheses, but everything here is just multiplied together. So we can kind of break it down into 6 times x to the fourth times y to the third, and that's all just multiplied by 5, multiplied by x squared, and multiplied by y to the seventh. So we can just go through and put the things together that go together. So we have 6 times 5, we can simplify that, that's equal to 30. We have x to the fourth times x squared. So we would add the exponents there to get x to the sixth, and we have y to the third times y to the seventh. Again, adding the exponents gives us y to the 10th. So that's equal to 30, x to the sixth, y to the 10th. So next you should look at the checkpoint 1 problems. Do these in your notes, check your answer, and then move on with the rest of the video. The next rule that we're going to look at is the quotient rule. The quotient rule says that when we're dividing exponential expressions with the same base, we subtract the exponent in the denominator from the exponent in the numerator. So it's numerator minus denominator. Our base again will not change. So looking at example 2, we have negative 2 to the seventh over negative 2 to the fourth. So we would keep our base as negative 2, and our exponents we would subtract 7 minus 4, which equals 3. So our answer is negative 2 to the third, or we can multiply that out. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 is negative 8. For part B, we can go through again and break this up and just combine the things that go together. So looking at the numbers, we have 30 divided by 5. Looking at the x's, we have x to the 12th over x to the third. And we have y to the 9th over y to the 7th. So we can go through and just simplify each of these. 30 divided by 5 is 6. Now, it's tempting here to divide these exponents because we just divided these numbers, but we have to remember that we're subtracting. So 12 minus 3 is x to the 9th. And then for the y's, 9 minus 7 is 2. So it would be 6, x to the 9th, y to the 2nd. So next you should look at checkpoint 2. Do these in your notes, check your answers, and then move on with the rest of the video. Our next rule is called the zero power rule. The zero power rule states that anything to the 0 power is equal to 1. So 8 to the 0 power, that's equal to 1. Number 2 is negative 6 to the 0 power, that's also equal to 1. Now pay close attention to the difference between number 2 and number 3. In number 2, the negative 6 is surrounded by parentheses. In number 3, there are not parentheses around the negative 6. And when we talked about order of operations in the last video, we saw that exponents comes before you put a negative sign on. So for this one, I would do 6 to the 0 power first and then make it negative. So this is actually equal to negative 1. Number 4, we have parentheses around 5x, and so that's saying to raise the whole thing to the 0 power. So it's no different if it were just a number or just an x. That whole thing raised to the 0 power is equal to 1. Now, again, notice it's different from number 5 because we don't have parentheses in number 5. In number 5, the 0 power is only attached to the x, and so only the x is raised to the 0 power. So we have x to the 0, which is 1, and then we multiply that by 5. So for number 5, it would be 5 times 1, which is equal to 5. Our next rule is called the negative exponent rule. And the negative exponent rule says that if we have a negative exponent, we can rewrite that as a fraction, put the base with the exponent in the denominator of the fraction, and then the negative sign goes away. So notice we have negative n here, 1 over b to the positive n here. So for example 3 from the book, we want to use the negative exponent rule to write each expression with a positive exponent and simplify if possible. So for a, 9 to the negative 2 power, we would rewrite that as 1 over 9 to the positive 2 power. Now I know 9 to the second power is 81, so this would be 1 over 81. For b, negative 2 to the negative 5th. This would be 1 over. Now the negative 2 stays negative. What changes is the sign on the exponent becomes positive. So that becomes positive 5. And I can do negative 2 to the 5th power. That's equal to negative 32. So 1 over negative 32. Or you could type the negative sign kind of in front of the whole fraction, like this, so negative 1 over 32. For c, we have 1 over 6 to the negative 2 power. Now this one is already in a fraction, so it's a little bit weird. What's going to happen is leave that 1 over on top as it is, and then the bottom becomes 1 over 6 to the positive 2 power. Now thinking about dividing fractions, this is 1 divided by 1 over 6 squared is 36. Flip the second fraction and multiply 1 times 36 over 1. That's equal to 36. And for d, what we would do is the negative exponent here is only on the x. So the 7 stays the 7. The x to the 5th, that moves to the denominator and becomes positive 5. Y squared here, that stays as y squared because it does not have the negative exponent. So putting this all together, we would have 7y squared over x to the 5th. So next you should do checkpoint 3. Do these in your notes, check your answers, and then move on with the rest of the video. Our next rule is the power rule of exponents, which says that if we have an exponential expression that's raised to a power, we multiply the exponents. So going through these examples, example 4, our first one is 2 squared and then raised to the 3rd power. So in this one we would multiply the exponents, 2 times 3, that's equal to 2 to the 6th. For b, when we multiply, we get 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Now generally speaking, we want to avoid using negative exponents, and so if we get a negative exponent, we would change that to a positive exponent by putting it in the denominator of the fraction. So that would be 1 over y to the 15th. For c, we're multiplying negative times a negative. Negative 4 times negative 2 is positive 8. So I don't need to rewrite that as a fraction because after I did the multiplication, I ended up with a positive number. So my answer is just b to the 8th. So next you should do these checkpoint problems for checkpoint number 4. Check your answers and then move on with the rest of the video. Our next rule is products to powers, and what we have here is we have multiple things in parentheses, and we put the exponent on each of the factors in the parentheses. So we have a to the n and b to the n power. And we would do that for both numbers and variables. So for example, 5, we would have -2 raised to the 4th power, and we would have y squared raised to the 4th power. -2 to the 4th power, that's going to be +16. So if it's a number, I can just multiply it out and get the answer. And for variables, we would multiply the exponents. So that would be y to the 8th. So next you should look at checkpoint problem number 5. Do this in your notes, check your answer, and then move on. Our next rule is quotients to powers. Same thing as powers, products to powers. We would put the exponent on everything in the parentheses. So for example, 6, we would have -3 to the 4th over x to the 4th. So I put the negative sign with the number because that's generally the easiest way to do it. -3 to the 4th is going to come out to be +81, and then x to the 4th on the bottom. For b, we would have x to the 2 times 3. This is a 3 outside of parentheses, so it's being multiplied by the exponent that's inside. And then in the denominator, we have 4 to the 3rd. 2 times 3 is 6, so x to the 6th, and 4 to the 3rd is 64. So next you should do checkpoint problem number 6. Do this in your notes, check your answer, and then move on with the rest of the video. Lastly, here we have a summary. To be considered simplified, these are the things that we need to look for. First of all, if there are any parentheses, we need to get rid of them, usually by distributing an exponent or multiplying things out. We don't want to have powers raised to powers, so we need to take care of that. Each base should occur only once, so we need to combine things together. And we don't want to have zero or negative exponents. So that's the end of this video.